We are continuing our study of Romans chapter 1, and this video will be covering 2 verses 26 and 27. For this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for that which is contrary to nature, and likewise the men too abandoned natural relations with women and burned in their desire toward one another, males with males committing shameful acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. I'm choosing to deal with these 2 verses in one video because the 2 verses are really 2 sides of the same coin. I understand in our current cultural climate that these verses can be quite difficult for some because of their content. Nonetheless, they are scripture, so we will be dealing with them. I think very clearly the text has, to one degree or another, homosexuality in view here, and for anyone who has the idea that the Bible never deals with these topics, as I've said before, the hermeneutical gymnastics you're going to have to do in order to say that are substantial. Now, I've suggested that Paul has Genesis in mind here, and I think this verse fits with that framework. It's in the earliest chapters of Genesis we see what natural relations are between man and woman. Natural in the sense that it is the way God intended. We see this in Genesis 2:24 very clearly. One man, one woman, and anytime someone messes with that one man, one woman structure, the text condemns them. We see this in Cain's line with his descendant Lamech, who takes 2 wives, and the text portrays him as a villain in Genesis 4. We see an explicit condemnation of homosexuality in Genesis 19 with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And we have to keep this in the context of Paul's argument here. What he is demonstrating is God giving mankind over to their own wants, which run unchecked, as a response to their rejection of him. So they receive in themselves, he says, the due penalty for their error. This is literally what you might call irony in the highest form. Because man rejected the revelation of God, God lets them go with their own flawed reasoning, making it impossible for them to find any solution to the crisis of sin in and of themselves. Their due penalty is what you might call reprobation to their own minds. I think Paul is articulating very clearly here very surprising ways in which God expressed his wrath against humanity. And it's very much worth saying that Paul does not write these things to condemn people and leave them in their condemnation. He is writing to present to them the message of redemption and freedom from these things that is present in the gospel of Christ. And as someone who is involved in ministry pretty regularly, who understands to some degree how provocative the subject matter here is, I do want to step aside from the text for just a moment and say that Paul is not dealing with just one person specifically here. He is building an argument using his Old Testament hermeneutic, which should be our hermeneutic. Paul is not trying to have a conversation about homosexuality. However, what we glean from his argument, which is coming from his reading of the Old Testament, is that unnatural sexual relations are the result of God giving mankind over to their flawed human reasoning. And I think that nudges open the door that leads to some very important and interesting conversations to be had in our present cultural context. So we'll continue with verse 28 in the next video.